Thank you, Secretary Kennedy. This is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation.
We've just been listening to President Trump talking about trade talks with China and a new executive order on drug prices. The president calls the talks in Geneva very friendly and says he could speak with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the end of the week.
President Trump just announcing on Truth Social that prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced by 30 to 80% almost immediately. This appears to be the major announcement that the president has been teasing for days. He plans to sign an executive order tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.
Trump also announced a new executive order aimed at lowering drug prices, calling it one of the most consequential orders in history. He says the order forces drug companies to charge the U.S. what they charge other developed countries, adding that the U.S. will no longer subsidize health care of foreign countries.
Prescription drug prices in the U.S. are much higher than in other countries, sometimes as much as 10 times higher, but the pharmaceutical industry has complained that efforts to negotiate prices for federal drug purchases are price controls, since the federal government is such a dominant buyer in the drug market. In his social media post, the president said campaign contributions from the industry won't sway him or the Republican Party on this issue, and said he expects his plan to save trillions of dollars for taxpayers.
They will rise throughout the world in order to equalise and for the first time in many years bring fairness to America. I'll be instituting a most favoured nations policy whereby the United States will pay the same price as the nation that pays the lowest price anywhere in the world. So it's a lengthy post here from Donald Trump. So we're just catching the end of that there. So, I mean, the crux of it is, Laura, that they think they're being ripped off. How does that affect us?
Well, it means that it affects our pharmaceutical benefit scheme.
It's one of the big exporters for us.
Yeah, it affects the price of medicine here in Australia potentially as well. So this is one thing that is kind of one of those, sacred areas, particularly for a Labor government. They want to do everything, to protect the cost of medicines. We've just had basically a Medicare election as well. I mean, to keep this all in context, really steel and aluminium tariffs are the least of Australia's worries. A 10% general tariff on all our goods going to the United States, also not a big problem. But this could be an absolute game changer. So Kevin Rudd, our trade minister, the Prime Minister, certainly got its work cut out for us.
It's an interesting move for the White House.
It is, and that is kind of about trade. At the same time, he's also been talking about expanding the ability to make drugs here, making that easier for companies to be able to do that, and companies to build, and drug companies to build, and factories to build, and to bring some of that home as well. And then also, not to forget, we're expecting some sort of announcement related to China. I don't know if that all gets woven into this or not, Lydia, but your thoughts?
I was thinking the same thing, because a lot of our active ingredients for our pharmaceutical drugs come from places like China and from India as well. So I was wondering, I had the same thought, I wonder if some of this China deal is also addressing where our pharmaceutical ingredients are coming from and having to do something to do with, reshoring or giving us better access or more transparent access to those critically needed ingredients. I also have another thought too, is I wonder if he's addressing the pharmacy benefit managers. We've heard a lot about them in the news, but those are kind of like the intermediary players that broker access to drugs between hospitals and pharmacies from the drug makers. There have been a lot of questions about their role and how pricing is set for access for Americans. Maybe he's addressing that. That's been a big issue as well. So we'll have to wait and see till tomorrow.
Listen, I think the most important thing in the drug world is the generic drugs, getting generic versions of drugs out to the market as quickly as possible. I don't understand the crazy drug pricing. It doesn't make any sense to me. Sometimes I'm not taking any drugs right now. I have no prescriptions, but anytime that I've gone over prescriptions with my doctor, they say, well, there's this thing. And then you look at the cost and you say, that is a crazy price of a drug. And then there's some other drug that you might need, and it's like, 11 cents. And I don't understand how it's done. It's all very Byzantine. I think most people get confused by this kind of thing. Hopefully, the good news from Trump is just that, good news.
All right, well, we'll see what happens tomorrow. It's going to be a busy Monday in Trump world.
Is this something typically that would go through an executive order?
No. I mean, in order to make any fundamental change, you've got to go through Congress and change the law, right? So this is an executive order, and we'll see what the language is at this 9 o'clock event today at the White House and see exactly how he's planning to execute this.
But I imagine there won't be pushback because in many ways, I imagine most Democrats like this plan, and I imagine some Republicans do too.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're looking for savings, right, and you want to figure out how to balance the budget, and this is easier than raising taxes. And that's one of the other things that Republicans have been looking at very hard up on Capitol Hill as they try to make the numbers work. So you're looking for revenue. This is a good place to find it. The pharmaceutical industry, is powerful, but it might not be powerful enough to hold this one back.
The guts to stand up to the withering criticism and lobbying that's going to occur as soon as folks hear about the executive order. So on behalf of the child in Philadelphia who's got an autoimmune disease with a $1,000 a month drug, or the older woman in Los Angeles who's on a blood thinner who can't afford her copay, I want to thank President Trump. God bless you for having the guts to take on this industry. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So let's talk about the details a little bit. And this is primarily about equalization, as President Trump said. It's about fairness. Think of NATO as a metaphor. When President Trump said, you've got to pay a little more so it makes sense for all of us, they came up. And the European countries contributed. The same thing we believe will happen in this situation. Most people who have thought about this process agree that it is patently unfair to tolerate the numbers that Secretary Kennedy and President Trump have reflected to you. On this chart to my left is a list of the 10 drugs that were negotiated in the IRA. Again, this is the bill, the law, that regulates a negotiation process. This is the best price that was able to be obtained by the Biden administration. And if you look at these numbers, they actually reflect how much on top of the most favored nation price was being paid by the United States. So the closest to me, Bob, you can point to the chart, it's the closest one, 289%, the one that's closest to you. That means that we are paying in America 4 times more than that drug costs in other countries. Again, 100% is the baseline. It's 289% above that baseline. It goes all the way down to where we're paying 50% more than any other country. That's the range. As was pointed out by President Trump, half the time we're paying 3 times more than is paid in other countries. It doesn't make any sense for the system. That stated, President Trump has over and over again indicated, and Secretary Kennedy reflected as well, we want innovation. We want our technology partners doing the best they can to make the best solutions for drugs to cure as many people in America and around the world as possible. By getting our allies to pay a bit more, as they should be, and they should have for many years been doing, will course correct a problem that's gotten out of hand. And by doing that in a thoughtful, effective way, we're going to be able to get the pharmaceutical industry whole. Those jobs will still be here, will still be productive, will still be curing cancer and a slew of other ailments that plague humanity. America will still be the leader in this space, but we're paying the appropriate amount, the right-sized amount for those tasks. So over the next 30 days, the 4 of us up here, together with people standing in the back of this room, we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, are going to be approaching pharmaceutical companies to talk specifically about what we want the most favored nation price to be based on the best data we have. We're looking forward to a thoughtful interaction with these corporate leaders, many of whom we've spoken to and in quiet will agree the system is not right the way it is. They're patriotic Americans, they want what's right. But the fact that in my lifetime, as Secretary Kennedy said, for the first time, we have a thoughtful and aggressive approach, thanks to President Trump, on taking on the special interests.
But again, we don't have details about what drugs are going to be prioritized. U.S. officials say that they're going to look into the costliest drugs, and it will likely include weight loss drugs. But the president, he also tried to do something similar to this in his first term, but he was stopped by the courts. A judge determined that the president had not followed the proper procedure. So unclear how all of this is going to play out, but it could have a dramatic impact.
Joe, what's the potential big picture impact of this executive order if it does stand in the courts?
Okay, this is a very big deal if it legally it survives, simply because we will be able to import drugs from other jurisdictions at a much lower cost. That will actually flatten the landscape for down market households. Now that's good. However, if you're an investor, what this means is revenues are going to narrow and profit margins are going to shrink in that industry. And we'll have to see whether this executive order, and that's all it is, it's an order, survives the political and legal fight going forward.